So far the capacities we've seen in our programs are quite limited. We can only write what's called straight line programs. The important next step is to learn about branching programs. So let me summarize what a straight line program is first. Straight line program has some code that consists of a series of instructions. And the program is just run straight, meaning all the instructions are run. In a branching program, it's a bit different. We have a series of instructions and a very long file, maybe, or several long files. The program starts here and starts executing. But at some point, it encounters a test. Now the test can have two outcomes. Either we keep on going, or we jump somewhere else. So we'll jump here, let's say. And then the program keeps on going from here, where it might actually encounter another test and might jump there, and so on. So programs can get very complicated in this way, obviously, but a new capacity is acquired. The programs are capable of doing more things that way. So one important aspect that we saw is that it requires a test. So let me draw a little summary picture, maybe a bit more formal than what I did so far. So we have code, and we encounter a test. Now this test will determine whether we jump to the true block, which is also code, so it's also a square. And the true block is only executed if the result of the test is true. And there will be a false block, which is only executed if the result of the test is false. After this, well, everything rejoins into this code as well. So the test starts what is the conditional, and this is the general picture we have. Okay, so the true block here might be jumping somewhere else in the program, modifying the next instruction in the program. In Python, conditionals are implemented with if. Actually, if, else if, or else. So let me just give you the keywords. So we have some starting Python code, and we execute or we test some value, and we'll specify the test with an if, and this is the test, and then we'll end up with a colon, and then there will be a first block that is test that will only be executed if the test is true. So this is the true block. And there will be an optional false block. So if the test is false or not true, and this will be indicated with else and a colon and some indentation in the block. Now when the indentation stops, will indicate that this is the end of the conditional. So the code that follows where the indentation stops is not part of the conditional. Okay, so that's our picture of a Python conditional, and in the end, in the source file, it looks like if some test, colon, and then some indentation is left, and we have the true block here, and then maybe the optional else block, or false block, sorry, with the same indentation, and with no indentation is the previous code and the following code. So that's an if-else in Python. So now we want to learn about more complicated tests that involve elif. So this is how it works. This is how you write it in Python. You'll write a first test and then some block of code here, A, that is indented, and then write a second test with an elif before that with a colon, and a second block of code encoded, and then several elifs if you want. So this is test 3. And finally, an else, which is optional, so are the elifs, but an else at the end, which is followed by yet another block of code. And then some following instructions that will be executed regardless of the conditional afterwards. Okay, so this is how to picture it. So we have some preliminary code that we're executing, and suddenly we're encountering test 1, and test 1 can be true or false, and if test 1 is true, then we execute A. If test 1 is false, then we consider test 2. If test 2 is true, we execute B. If test 2 is false, then we look at test 3. And in the picture I've drawn on the left, I have two options. If test 3 is true, then I do C, and if test 3 is false, then I do D, and this is indicated with the else. Regardless of what happens, the execution rejoins there and goes on with the code that is here. So maybe code Z. Okay, so one really important thing to understand is that the block of code in A is only executed if test 1 is true, but more importantly, the block of code in B is only executed if test 2 is true. That's easily understandable, but there is an extra requirement that test 1 has to be false. If test 1 is true, then B is never even considered because we immediately decide to go this way.